Great. Well, here's our agenda for today, though it's a small group, so we can deviate from this, and we will save some time at the end for Q&A, but feel free to hop in if there's questions in the moment that you'd like to ask. We'll do some just quick introductions of Emily and me. We'll talk about the value of digital books, how our organizations have incorporated digital books, talk about some of the resources that are available, and address that there is some skepticism when it comes to digital books and how both of us have addressed that, and welcome anybody else's input on that one as well, if you've experienced digital books and had to address any skepticism yourself. So should we jump in, Emily?
Yes, let's go for it.
Great. Why don't you kick us off and introduce yourself and Bookspring and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, as I said, I'm Emily Ball-Cicchini, and I'm the executive director of Bookspring in Austin, Texas. I have been at Bookspring about 8 years. Bookspring focuses on kids from birth to age 12, but has a special interest in early literacy, early childhood, birth to age 5, and then extending up to age 8 or third grade. So we're really focused on moving that kindergarten pre-readiness and the third grade reading scores in Texas. Until recently, we were pretty much an in-person book distribution organization using the RIF model. We were founded as Reading is Fundamental of Austin in 1974. So this is our 50th anniversary this year. But during COVID, particularly, we were really locked out of the schools. And we had been dabbling and using some digital books from 2 different sources. And I have kind of a background of instructional technology and higher education. And I was like, what am I going to do with my employees while we're all working remotely? And I was like, let's really build out a beautiful digital resource that includes digital books that are accessible right now to kids and to families at home. And so that's how we got our feet wet. And then it's really exploded, so that as of last week, we just released a book app, a B3 Books app full of open source books that you can download and you can use both on your phone and your tablet. And it's all on our website as well. So that's been my experience with open access digital books.
Thanks, Emily. I'm Erica Riddle, as we introduced earlier. I'm the executive director for Kristi Yamaguchi's Always Dream. Kristi, Olympic gold medalist in figure skating. In 1996, she founded Always Dream with the focus of wanting to give back and help other young people achieve their dreams. And so we used to be we had a broad focus, but all related to children and supporting underserved communities. And then in 2011, really honed in on early literacy as our focus. At the time, Kristi was just becoming a published children's book author, and had kids that were at that prime age of really needing to introduce literacy. And Kristi started learning about some of the realities in this country and the stats around reading proficiency. And so we actually used to be a Raising a Reader affiliate. They've got their red book bag model that is primarily based in the classrooms. And then in about 2016, 2016, the organization decided, we really want to try to introduce technology into the program. And so we partnered with an advisory board of early childhood, early literacy experts who helped us design our Always Reading program. And I'll get into more of the nuts and bolts of it, but we provide a subscription-based digital children's library access, similar to Emily, really focused on pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, and looking at how to help families get engaged in their child's reading journey at home. And it's been a wild ride. The pandemic, interestingly enough, we actually grew during the pandemic, because we were already, one, digital, and two, focused on the home environment, which is exactly where all the kids were, home with their families. So we didn't really need to do much pivoting in our program model, and we're able to thrive during a time when so many folks were trying to figure out, what do we do? So we were fortunate in that regard. I like to joke that maybe somebody on the board had a crystal ball and could predict that, but I don't think that's actually true. Great. So Emily and I thought it'd be good to talk about the value of digital books. There's a lot of different studies out there that do talk about the benefits of digital books. So starting with the first one, Emily, chime in at any time here. Really, there are a lot of features of digital books that can advance learning. So, a lot of the digital book platforms, which is probably what I'm more familiar with, have some additional capabilities where you can follow along. They have read to me functions, and you can it can help young children and even adults who maybe English is not their first language or have literacy challenges themselves, really help improve their phonemic awareness and print concept awareness, which is so important at that young, early age.
I'll just add that because there also can be features in digital books, particularly for independent readers from grades 3 up, that are helping to provide access to interesting books and topics that they're interested in, because through subscription series like Epic, you can, if you're into astronauts, you can read every book that's ever been published, or many books that have been published by different great publishers about a topic that you're really interested in. But also screen readers in books and digital ebooks that are specifically ebooks have a lot of adaptive features in them for people with disabilities, people with dyslexia, people who have, color blindness, things that you wouldn't even think that are necessarily a challenge, like you can change the font size. So there's a lot of adaptability about that. So we're still talking about the positive value. I could start to talk about the negative, but we're not going to do that until next, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I failed to mention that some of the digital library platforms will also have tools built in, like dictionaries. So if you don't know what a word means or how to pronounce the word, you can kind of hover over the word and it'll provide a quick definition of it. So definitely some additional features that can be really beneficial with digital books. Emily, you and I think definitely align on this one. So let's talk a little bit about adult-child interaction. That doesn't go away with a digital book, right?
Exactly. And I will brag a little bit on this, or just share this. At Bookspring, we've been doing something called the Texas Reading Survey since 2017. And we do kind of a public poll on Mechanical Turk of like, what are the reading habits of Texans? There's some great data from Pew Charitable Trust, and there's great, American Community Survey from the US Census that has questions about, do you read out loud to your kids? But we wanted a lot more detail, like, what are you reading? When do you read? What types of devices are you using? Are you using your phone? Are you using tablet? And the thing that was so surprising to us with COVID, because we were trying to aim for like 20 print books in the home, and we were kind of moving up before COVID hit. When COVID hit, the number of print books dropped from in the 50s to the teens. Okay, the number of print books at home that had at least 20. But the number of families that were reading together using a digital device, and this is for kids, families with kids under the age of 12, went from about 40 to 50% to 80 to 90%. So like the amount of families right now that are saying, yes, I have read a book together on a tablet or on a phone, and this is all income levels, okay? And it doesn't change. It does get a little bit less for lower income, but not as less as you would think, because low income families, there's a lot of things like, oh, they can have sometimes trouble with broadband access, but most people have access to an internet connected device because you need it for society at this point, right? And I think COVID in Texas, we certainly gave away a lot of Chromebooks and hotspots and ways for people to get access. And there's a big broadband thing happening across the country right now. So I think this sort of thought that like the people that we want to reach in low income don't have access to it. I think they do. And I think it's kind of like part of our mission to help them be literate in these digital devices as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've seen that at Always Dream too, and in the different schools and school districts that we're partnering with, is that the majority, like high majority, like 90 something percent of families have at least one smart phone in the home. And so especially during the pandemic, I think people were absolutely leveraging that technology and that access. Those are great stats though. That's very encouraging to hear. Um, I Always Dream, our program is really focused on family engagement. And so a lot of the strategies that we're sharing with our family members about how to engage their children in reading at home, and reading together and doing book sharing practices and strategies, we are saying do that on the tablet. It's really, there's a lot of research that says that when you're doing book sharing, it's just as effective on a screen as it is a print book, because you're still employing those same kind of strategies. You're sitting together, you're spending quality time with one another. You can still go through the mechanics of turning a page, even looks a little bit different, but you can still have that. You can still ask them questions about what you're reading on the page. You can picture walk. So there's still a lot of benefits, and great things that can happen from sharing a digital book with a child, as a print book. The power of choice, that is a huge one. At Always Dream, we're really focusing on those 4 and 5-year-olds, and trying to build that love of reading. And so much of finding the joy and love of reading is finding topics and characters that you're interested in. And so the beauty of some of these digital books is that you can have a lot of access to them at your fingertips, as opposed to, physical books do take up space, or you can only check out so many from the library at a time. With digital books, for example, we use Epic, and our students and families have access to 40,000 books. That can get a little bit overwhelming, but at the same time, they've got really robust search functions that can allow you, like Emily was saying, if you want to learn about astronauts or space, type that in, and goodness, you're going to have a huge set of content that comes up. If you really like Curious George, you can find dozens of Curious George books on the platform, and really finding that topic or that thing that children, in particular, love, is really what's going to help them build that interest in reading. Emily, anything to add to that?
Just also the idea of the timeliness of it. Like, so it doesn't, like, there isn't a wait. Now, there can be good things about waiting, right? But for a parent, like the biggest barrier that we see that our parents report about why I don't read out loud to my child is not that they don't think it's a good idea. Like 95% know that it's a good idea to read out loud to their kid, but they're like, I don't have time, or I don't have the book. The third
Yeah.
one is they don't think that they're old enough. So Erica, I need some good like messaging for like, you can start reading even before they're listening or focusing on you. You can start even in the womb, but that's, I think, the timeliness of access to it. So the convenience for the parents of being able to access those digital books, I think, is something that should increase home reading behaviors.
Yeah. I think we need to get in touch with our friends at Reach Out and Read. I'm sure they've got plenty of stats around why you need to read early, as pretty much every pediatrician is pushing. Start as young as possible and read as regularly as you can, no matter how old or young your child is.
Exactly.
And then the last is portability, which I think equals a potential for inclusivity. So I mentioned, physical books do take up space. One thing that we've seen in our program, is that, not all families have space for books, or housing where they can have a place to store the books. Many of our students actually go back and forth between multiple homes, especially if you're in a, separated family, or you've got, mom here, dad here, or, grandma, grandpa, auntie, uncle, who knows who's involved in your caretaking. And the nice thing about digital books is it can go with you. It's on your phone, it's on your tablet, it's very portable. And I think depending on the situation, that really can provide a lot of inclusivity and help get that access to folks who maybe wouldn't otherwise be able to do anything with physical books. Okay, we'll move on. I think now that we've set the stage for the great uses of digital books, I thought it'd be great for each of us to share maybe in a little bit more detail about how we've incorporated digital book access into our organizations and our offerings. So Emily, I only put a little bit on here, so you're gonna have
I know,
to
and
fill.
I meant to like put like the other thing is that we're actually doing Bookspring originals, but I'll get to that because I'll
Yes.
kind of go through the thing. So when we started off with when I first got to Bookspring, I was like, where are the digital books? How can we do digital books? And I tried to reach out to Epic, and I tried to reach out to and I tried to use the First Book codes because First Book will provide codes. So if you're working with a group that's a fairly controlled group, you can get codes and distribute codes. And Erica can kind of describe more about how she's doing that through a subscription service. But Bookspring we were already serving 100,000 kids with 200,000 books a year. So I couldn't imagine how I was going to manage distributing codes, even if I could get them, right? Like digital access codes. And our local United Way had done something where they had like preloaded tablets, gave them to all these great, like 200 families, but they didn't provide internet access. So like after a year, the tablets were bricked basically because they didn't have, the families at that time didn't have internet access. So that was I was like, I want to do open access. I want to do open educational resources, which is a movement in higher ed. We were doing it basically for foreign language textbooks in and obscure titles that they weren't lucrative enough. There wasn't a potential market and that was big enough for traditional textbook companies to continue to publish the books or produce the books because there wasn't a big enough market for it, right? So that's how I found out about open educational resources. And so I was like, where are the open educational resource Creative Commons books that are sort of like Wikipedia books? And I looked and I searched, and there were lots of websites that were like not really rights cleared. They were like people that had scraped books or people that had digitized books or like things that were bad copyright things that I was not going to get Bookspring in for. So, but I did find these two sources, Storyweaver, Pratham Storyweaver from India. There is a US version of it, but the one in India is the real main one. And they have, several tens of thousands of books that are kind of creator, fan created, although some corporations have done them, like Lego has done them, Oracle has done them. So it's a platform that allows you to write your own story and or translate stories that other people have written. So when you sign onto the platform, you're agreeing to do a Creative Commons license with anything you contribute to it. But then those books are actually rights cleared. So they're Creative Commons. So because of that, I am allowed to download the PDF of the book as a user and put it into my Bookspring platform along with a set of activities that are based on a theme. That's what we ended up doing, was 52 weekly themes through BB, the Bookspring butterfly, like little video app thing. And primarily we use Storyweaver books. So I had an army of work studies. I had 4 fluent bilingual English Spanish because They have some Spanish translations, but they're European Spanish. They're not good for Mexico. So we had to do Mexican, Texas Spanish translations for our population. And so that was my production that we did for about, a year during COVID to get those first sets of a couple hundred books up on our website so that they're usable, accessible, which have now turned into this B3 Books app. We're still continuing to curate and add books all the time. During that time, we found Book Dash from South Africa, which is a more controlled way of creating books. They actually invite people who are children's book illustrators, authors, and designers to create these beautiful Creative Commons books. And they release all the files. They're up there. You can use them today. You can go to Book Dash yourself and use the same books that I'm using right now. And they are beautiful books. I mean, there's not as many of them. There's probably 20 or 30 or 40 or something like that of them, but they're beautiful books. And we reached out to both Storyweaver and we let them know what we were doing. And there's cross links to our websites and everything like that. And they're all happy and supportive. Book Dash is like, you can print those books in America if you want. And because we don't want to ship them to you from South Africa. So I was able to take 3 titles in my Mexican Spanish, Texas Spanish, and print them for $1.69 a piece. So I did, so in terms of my purchased books for Bookspring, we had, about 5,000 each title, very cheap book price that is a really good 3 to 4-year-old book that really, all we had to pay for was the printing. We had to do a lot of layout to it to get it to fit right. But and I don't think that's going to scale for us. But finally, because of all that, at Bookspring, we're like, we still need more Spanish books. So we've opened up Bookspring Originals. We're doing workshops with volunteers to create new books. We're doing one about San Antonio and the Battle of the Flowers. And we're working on it this afternoon, actually. I'm totally very excited about it. So that's why, that's how we're continuing to provide open access books through Bookspring.
That's amazing, Emily. Thanks for sharing that. That's great that Storyweaver and Book Dash were willing and have this platform available to provide that open access.
And let me stress to everybody, you can do it too. You see what I'm saying? Because it's Creative Commons, you can take the books and print them yourselves. You can put them in your own platform. There's another group that's called World Reader in California. They're using Storyweaver books too. So I was like, oh, that's one of my titles, So there is this kind of other market of open access books out there. And I'm just encouraging everybody to participate in it because I think it helps solve our problem, how to get good. Like the more people that do it, the better quality of that material that will be.
Yeah, that's great. So Always Dream, we do provide physical books to the families in our program. We do 3 different book distributions through the year. So I think each family gets about a dozen books by the end of the school year. But really the bread and butter of our program is that we're providing all of the families in our program with a digital children's library subscription. We provide them with a tablet. If they don't have Wi-Fi at home, we give them a data connection. And then we give them all of those resources. And then we have a book coach who is really working with the families. They're providing them curriculum, text messages twice a week on book sharing strategies, but also because we're using a digital children's library and Epic, we're able to track a lot of data. And so our book coaches are using that to reach out to families and provide some accountability and encouragement so they can see if a family hasn't logged on to Epic and hasn't been reading, they can reach out and say, hey, just checking in, noticed you haven't read this week, anything I can do to help you get started. And sometimes the responses back are, we lost our charger, so we'll send them a new charger. We lost our card with the login information, and we'll get them set up with that. Other times it's that, I don't know how to find the time. And so our book coaches will coach them through that, or I can't find any content that my child's interested in. And so they'll walk them through the search functions and how to ask specific questions to really find things that their kids might be interested in. On the flip side, you know, we've got some families and students who are amazing readers, are super readers. And so our book coaches are also sending them text messages with encouragement, like, keep it up. You're only 15 minutes away from your goal of 180 minutes a month, or, you know, whatever it might be. But I just included a few different data points here so you can get a sense of the kind of data that we're able to track. And Emily, you talked about the codes. It's, you know, we've had some evolution. You know, we started with Epic. We started with Epic, and at the time, they really only had a consumer version of their platform, which meant that we had to negotiate a price per license, and then we, similar to you, actually brought in a bunch of interns over the summer who basically helped us get code set up and login set up for each individual student and family in our program. That was not scalable. And I think Lori, our director of programs, who's on the call today, she and I recognize that, like, if we're scaling this thing, like, there is no way we can stick with Epic if this is all that their offering is. And we met with their team, and they were like, we don't have an enterprise option in the pipeline. So yeah, if that's what you need, you might have to look elsewhere. So we went back to the robust research that our team did, and kind of revisited it around the different digital children's library platforms that was out there. We actually shifted last school year to a platform called Myon. We had had a previous relationship with them. They're now owned by Renaissance Learning. And it had all of the back end enterprise things that we needed to make this logistically possible. We were able to roster students and upload them by their classrooms. Like, the login process was very simple, super robust reporting and data on the back end. The downside was that we actually saw a pretty significant dip in reading activity. And when we surveyed our families, they said, well, we're just not seeing books that look interesting. It didn't have the same flashy cover pages of the books that Epic had. It didn't have a lot of those, like, name brand characters that, you know, kids are often looking for at that age. There also weren't a lot of book titles that you'd typically see at a bookstore or even at the library. And so we did see quite a significant dip in activity. And so we kind of last spring said, all right, well, what's our plan of attack here? Coincidentally, Epic reached out and said, hey, we just launched the School Plus program that actually meets a lot of what you're looking for. It is still a paid subscription, but it's we're able to roster students. We're able to do a lot of the enterprise things that we weren't able to do with Epic previously. And so we took a leap of faith. Admittedly, they're still building out some of the things that are on our wish list. So we're being patient, or as patient as we can be. But that's been, I think, overall, a really good move back to Epic for us. Our reading activity is up. We're seeing significantly higher average minutes read per month than we did last year on Myon. So, you know, it's about finding there's many digital children's library subscription platforms that are out there. And it's really about finding the one that you think is going to work best for you, best for your families, best for your budget, if that's the route you want to go down.
That's great. Erica, I just want to say, you know, that is one of the advantages to using a subscription program. If your population size can manage it, because you do have that really great student level, child level, family level data that is so important for showing impact. And so what I wanted to share with you is that, you know, for open educational resources, it's a little bit harder to create those metrics. But what we've done is that we do have a print book program at Bookspring that's called B3, Books Beginning at Birth. And so the families subscribe to Books Beginning at Birth, and then they get print books delivered every 6 months to their homes. And then after each delivery, the parents get a questionnaire that's pretty pretty rigorous about their behaviors, and that's our proxy for oral language proficiency. And so that's showing, between a 3 to 16% increase in certain key indicators of oral language proficiency. So that's the way so we're not able to actually track the actual behavior of the use of the digital materials. And I'll be honest that right now, we just launched the Book Act. Right now, they're overwhelmingly saying they're using the print books to read if they have them, right? And I'll be interested to see what's going on. So if you want to collect data and you use open educational resources, you have to build a whole other system to be able to do that, right? Which is, when you've got something that, if you can do Epic, which I think Epic is great. I used Epic with my kids, and our school system adopted it during COVID too. So, a lot of my families are familiar with Epic. I think it's a great tool because it does have, the great titles that everybody wants. And so I don't think open educational resources, necessarily replace these things. I think they're a supplement too. And they are harder to measure. You have to be craftier.
Yeah, we also do a survey of our families kind of at the end of the year to just try to measure change in behavior. I mean, we've got some of the digital data to back that up, but the reality is, we just want families to read at home, whether that's on digital books or print books. I mean, the print books, we don't have a way of tracking that data. So we know families are reading print books, and that's great. We want that. We want them to read anything. So even though we do have the digital library data, we know it's not complete. Like, I don't think it fully captures the reading activity that's happening in the home. And that's something that we also have to provide some narrative around when we're reporting out to our funders. So Emily's talked a lot about open source books. There's some other free options we can talk through here. And then I've got a slide on some paid digital book options. But Emily, I don't know if you want to talk about some of these. I borrowed them from your other.
Yeah, definitely. Unite for Literacy, I want to mention, they're wonderful kind of in our world, kind of, they are a book provider. They do print books. Mike from Unite for Literacy, he has a beautiful open bookshelf. It is not open educational resource, so it's like you can't download it or use it or other things. I mean, I talked to him and we do use it as part of our B3 program. We've got an agreement about that. I think he's very open to that. And he sort of looks at his open educational or his open resources. They're not Creative Commons, but they are open. You don't have to log in is the most important thing. You don't have to register or log in. And he's got a beautiful collection of books, and they're multilingual, so they read out loud. Good question. We're coming in with some questions now. Fable Cottage is just a few books that are multilingual European languages, but they're so beautiful. And these are private companies that are doing this because they think it's the right thing to do. So they're open on the web. They're not things that you could reuse, but you can point people towards them, right? So we do that. We kind of, say, hey, and if you like this, go try this website, right? And then the International Digital Children's Library, it's like a university archive. So there's really, really old stuff in there. And it's beautifully digitized, but it's not super user friendly. So there are probably some things on there that if you look and read the rights, some of them will be in public domain. The problem with a lot of the public domain books is they're so outdated that they would really need some editorial attention to be appropriate for today's audiences. A few of them, like the alphabet books, I think are kind of cool, but it would actually take a lot of work to actually make them digitally available to people.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, and there are some other free options here. So Amazon does actually have some selection of free children's ebooks that you can download and almost like purchase. And those would be read through their Kindle app. That selection rotates pretty regularly. So I think it depends on what kind of agreements they have with publishers and what they're making available there. similar, we talked about the Oxford Owl, like just similar there. Khan Academy for Kids, that's a free app, kind of focused on kids ages 2 to 8. They do have a library with content that they've created, but it's not just a digital library. They have other features as well. I think they've got like a math segment and a few other things. And so there's more stuff you have to sort through before you can actually get to the library. So it is an option. And it's actually one that in the summer when our program, because we run on a school year schedule, in the past, we've definitely partnered with Khan Academy Kids and encouraged families to look into that as a summer option. And then, the local libraries, many of them have partnerships with Overdrive, Libby, and then Sora is the children's library version of that. But the way these kind of offerings work is it is like a library. So you have to check it out and you can only keep it for like 21 days before it gets returned. So it was something we looked into. We actually did have some conversations with the folks at Overdrive and Sora, but we wanted to make sure that our families had full reign access, and the checkout process, we just decided wasn't going to work for what we wanted to do, but it might be something that you could do, or you could partner with your local libraries wherever you are to get that going. Sorry, accidentally clicked on the link. And then paid digital books. We've talked about Epic. So Emily mentioned a lot of schools do use Epic. That's free for schools, but it's only available during the school day. So Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if you're looking to provide free access during that time period, that's possibly an option. But it doesn't, give much flexibility for reading outside of school time and on the weekends. So now Epic they still have that individual family plan, but they do also have that new School Plus paid plan, which is what we're using. I talked about Myon, also subscription-based model. They have a lot of nonfiction titles, I think in comparison to Epic, where it was more fiction. Reading IQ is another one that is out there. They have an individual subscription model if you wanted to go down that route. And then also another one is Raz Kids that I know a lot of schools are using as well. So let's talk about the skepticism and like the downside, because there definitely are some things to be aware of with digital books and screen time. So I don't know. Do you want to kick us off here or start on any of these top bullet points?
Yeah. Structured screen time. So, there is this overwhelming concern right now that kids are really getting addicted to screens. And so I think that's the biggest thing is how can you be promoting reading on digital devices at a time when so many kids are getting addicted to it. And I think, my answer to that is that we have to help kids learn their boundaries with it, right? And so having an experience together with a device, sharing devices, you know, I think it kind of tames the device in some way. It puts it in its place. It doesn't make it see, I think one of the bad things is like when your device gets secretive, like when teenagers like go in their room and just like, what are you doing with your device, right? So there's all these kind of technical ways that you can, put boxes on it and screen times and stuff like that. But if you just learn a healthy relationship with the device from the beginning, I think for me, one of the leading edges is how do we model that for families? Like, how do we, as part of our early childhood reading interventions, model healthy screen time? I think I think Common Sense Media does a pretty good job of providing some guidelines, and there's actually an open curriculum for that at Common Sense Media that we have leaned on sometime.
Yeah, I just want to double down on that. I mean, I think Common Sense Media has got some great resources there around how to create healthy habits with screen time. And I think to what you said, Emily, we're really talking about structured screen time. So it's very different from passive screen time. We're talking about, I think, at least in our program, using screen time and digital books as a book sharing strategy. And so the idea is that a caregiver is sitting down with a child and still interacting with them in the book that's on the screen. Um, Not just saying like, here's a screen, go watch YouTube Kids for 20 something minutes. And I think that's the other thing too, is, we're really trying to be cognizant of our messaging around like how much time are we saying to spend on screens. And we're saying like, if you're reading for 15 minutes a day, like great, that's awesome. I don't think you need to be too stressed out about that kind of screen time and that amount of screen time.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I do want to get into a little bit about the distractions too. There are a lot of books, or there was this big explosion when the tablets and the iPhones, and I was working in higher ed and was very much on the rise of like how do we adapt iPads for higher education, and I was just, because I've always been a children's book person, I was sort of like really interested in these children's book apps. So they would develop single titles of books that would have lots of like pop-ups or games or things that like, you know, were kind of incorporated into the story that seemed kind of creative. But the research definitely said that is not good for reading comprehension. So the books that like had too many bells and whistles to them, too many, like if you tap this thing, the monkey's gonna jump or whatever. Those things really got scrutinized very heavily by researchers. So the least amount of distractions are better for digital books. The things that have helped, that do support, are highlighting the reading like as if you were pointing. So I've seen some innovative apps that actually can recognize the parent reading the voice reading out loud and will highlight the word in sync to the voice of who's reading it. The read aloud on its own as it goes forward is mixed. So we don't, I made a choice not to offer a lot of read aloud books. But the research on this is still going, very fast. I know right now that there's a group that we're working with at Vanderbilt who's designing an AI tool for digital books that will help prompt parents for questions to ask about the story. Is that a good idea? I don't know. But if they want to research it, they should. To me, it's just like my book, our book app at Bookspring is super simple. Somebody mentioned the World Reader book too, which is also very simple. But it just says, what do you want to read about today? And then the book pops up in a flip book. That's it. No distractions, no noise, no sound. So I'm about the minimizing distractions. I'm all for
Yeah.
that point.
100% agree with that. I mean, that was a pretty key thing we were looking for when we were evaluating library platforms, was as minimal distractions as possible. So really looking at, are there any gamification built into this? We wanted to remove that. And really just focus on the tablet that we're giving them is truly a reading device. We actually lock it down with a mobile management device system, so that they don't have access to anything else besides settings and the digital library. And we kind of, when we were evaluating digital library platforms, had a rubric that we were putting it up, each of them up against, and one of them was really around distractions. I would say we have seen a lot of benefits from the read aloud function, especially for our families where English is not their first language. They've been able to actually engage with their kids in the books, and have anecdotally told us, they're learning a lot of English too as participants in the program. So I can see how there's, possibly mixed reviews on the benefits of the read aloud function, but I think in our program we've seen a lot of good come from that offering. So I think again,
I think, and there it's even how it's done sometimes. Like I've seen it so that it stops until you turn the page. So there has to be an interactive. It's like to keep it more engaging. Like I'm talking about the things that kind of just go without
Yeah.
like some of the early Dr. Seuss's would just go, and that's just lends itself to like sit the kid and press the play on the book, right? like it's a movie. So those are the ones that I think are really bad about that. But I think, if it can support continued interaction between the parent and the child, then it's a great thing. And yes, for bilingual support, absolutely.
Yeah, we've also seen, on Epic and some of the other libraries we evaluated, we have multilingual families. And so really looking at how we could provide access to content that was available in multiple languages was really important to us. Epic had a good selection of Spanish content. I think they also had several other languages available as well, though the breadth of those other language libraries is not as large as Spanish and English. But it was important for us to find that. So yeah, I do think that's another benefit of digital book access, is that you can have make multiple languages available. This is our last slide. So I'll stop sharing my screen. I think there were some questions that came up in the chat. Eileen had asked what a budget for a program like this is for our organization. Do you pay per family who joins? So our budget, I will admit, our budget's kind of high, but it's because we have the book coach model that really drives up our costs. So if you're really just looking at providing the digital book access, I think we're spending about $12 to $15 per student or family. That's for a year, Eileen, so per student. I would highly recommend, if you're going to go down this path or explore that path, like get on the phone, try to reach out to folks at those companies and negotiate. I think we found that every paid platform has a slightly different cost model. So like at Mayan, they were looking at like a range of students and you just paid a flat fee depending on, the range of a number of students you were working with, whereas other programs are more of a per student model in terms of their pricing. So we found some variability there.
And at Bookspring, as part of our B3 program with the app, the digital book delivery, the newsletter, the push notifications are all part of our outreach budget. So our cost for the B3 program is $30 per child per year, and about $250 of that is for this digital outreach.
Yeah, Amy LinkedIn about World Readers program Booksmart. Yep, totally. Another great free resource that's available there. And then Eileen, I see a question here about an EdWeek article about screen time interfering with the reading process, and what study should we be reading? Emily, you had a great list.
I do. I like to read this stuff, and I do like Reading Rockets also as a newsletter that keeps up good research about it. I mean, it's a really hot area. The researcher that I really like to follow is named Marianne Wolf, and she wrote a book called Tales of Education in the 21st Century. She was a dyslexia researcher, and she became interested in digital books in terms of access and adaptability and accessibility. And she has this theory, and she did a lot of brain research. She did a lot of, and John Hutton, also from Reach Out and Read, is doing a lot of interesting brain research about parents, sound of mothers reading out loud, stuff like that. So there are definitely some people to follow in this world. But what Marianne Wolf says is, she says, the brain, like, you have to be taught to read. Like, you can talk, you kind of can learn to listen and talk just through socialization, but reading is a code. It's a human constructed code, and writing is a code, right? And you have to be taught how to do that. Somebody has to show you the path, has to help you break the code. When you read in print, it creates different paths in the brain neurologically than when you read digitally. Okay. So her point is that digital reading may in fact be different than print reading. And what we should be advocating for is that all of our kids have both skills. Print reading is better for sequencing, for for sequential causal relationships, for beginning, middle, and end, just the physical presence of the book that opens and closes. Whereas with a screen, it's like I find my information by going like this. It's hunt and search. So there's a different kind of information retrieval in the brain when you read digitally than when you read in print. So certainly my goal with our stuff is to create a print-like experience as much as possible for my digital books for young readers as a transition. That's, you know, our theory of change and our choice at Bookspring as the research is going on. But I encourage you not to be afraid of trying things in the field, because, you know, research is always going to be 5 or 10 years behind technology. And it would be better that people are, you know, I feel better about being able to deliver an app than somebody who's trying to create ad revenue from little children's books that they've scraped from somewhere, because families want this, they want it. Like, the reason why I did an app is not because I thought it was cool. I do think it's cool, but because our families were like, we like your online digital library. We'd really like to be able to have it in our phone and our app. So it was from our families that I could convince my board to do something crazy like build an app.
Yeah, I would also I'd just add, I think again, it goes back to how are you deploying digital books? You know, again, for us, it's really around we're pushing the book sharing experience, and that families are reading, using the digital books to read with their children and engage in literacy together. So I think that's pretty different than just saying, here's a device, here's a screen, go read all those books on it solo. I mean, definitely something I think kids can progress to once they've harnessed those literacy skills in like first, second, third grade. But, you know, for us, we haven't found there to be any issue with it, because we're really about families reading together and leveraging the digital books in that way.
Any other questions? Please just unmute and speak up if you'd like.
I thought it was great. It's very interesting. It's something that we really haven't been engaged in, or really, you know, I read the articles, I watch what's happening, but, you know, sometimes you get frozen because you don't know what to do. So this is a good way to learn from people who've already been there and done it. So thank you so much for your time and effort. Appreciate it.
I have one more question. Sorry.
Sure.
So my programs are face a sort of situation that I think a lot of like the book bank models would face, where we don't have like constant, we don't like really know who our clients are, right? So we're giving out, you know, on individual events through schools or through other organizations, but we're not collecting data. We don't have like a list of enrollees and stuff like that. And so because, you know, something, because we're in a situation like that, we'd almost be in a position of having to market using these digital resources to those kids. Does anyone have any experience with that? To these kids and families, excuse
One
me.
of the things that we do is we give out flyers with codes. So it's sort of like, and if you liked this book, go online and get more books. So, you know, that's why we have a page on our website, or a couple of pages on our website dedicated to it. We've actually done things like sent follow-ups to teachers, like, and here's a copy of this book for you that you can share with your families. So because the open access digital books from Storyweaver and Book Dash are open access, you can copy them and share them as much as you want. So they kind of are more like the print book bank books than the subscription models are, if that makes sense. And it
It
also
does,
drives
thank you.
people back to your website, which is good.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I think open access is probably the better route for you. And then funny, I was gonna say flyer with a QR code. I mean, a QR code is gonna make it easier for folks to get online and get onto your website to find them. Well, thanks so much for joining. I put the link to our slide deck in the chat, so you can have access to those various resources that we talked through. But and our contact information is on the slides too. So if you have any questions about this world, feel free to reach out to either of us. I know we'd be happy to chat with you about it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, with that, I hope you have a great Wednesday. And if you haven't signed up for it yet, the NBAA annual conference is coming up very shortly in February. So please make sure to sign up for that. We hope to see you there.